Just want to share a few housekeeping items for tonight's Zoom meeting. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast on the city's YouTube channel and cable channel 25. Please remember to mute yourself during the meeting when you are not speaking. The chat function for this public meeting is disabled. All chats will go directly to me. All board members, please keep your video on if you can. All others, please keep your video off unless you are participating during the meeting. If you have any trouble, you can send me a chat. And the city reserves the right to mute people or turn individual videos off to minimize distractions during the meeting. Please remember to state your name each time you speak for the benefit of those participating remotely. And I should have done the same when I started speaking. I'm Kathy Richardson, Interim Sustainability Director. And I just wanted to mention to the board members, there is another meeting tonight. That meeting starts at 7:30 here in the City Commission room. So this Sustainability Advisory Board meeting will hopefully wrap up around 7:15 to let that other group get set up for their meeting. Now I'll turn it over back to Kira.
Hi, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Do we have a second?
Do roll call.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to do roll call. Okay. Maddie?
Here.
Kay?
Here.
Nancy?
Here.
Stephen?
Here.
There's Craig Owens. Is Stan here? I don't see anybody else on my screen. Is Stan here?
He was.
He jumped in and he's off now. I don't have anybody in the waiting room right now.
Okay, do we go ahead and proceed or do we wait for Stan?
You have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Okay. All right. We need to approve the agenda. Can we get a motion for that?
So moved.
Wait, I have a question.
Who said, is that Kay?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm sorry. My camera is just not enough resources right now. I think if we're going to approve the agenda, that means that all the items are going to be on the agenda. And I have an issue with one of the agenda items.
Okay. Can you explain what that issue is, Kay?
Yes, the climate emergency was voted to be moved to the retreat. And it should not be on the agenda tonight.
Okay, I'd like to make a proposal to remove the climate emergency declaration and proposed board name change to be included in the goal setting session. Does somebody want to second that? Or first that?
I'll second.
Okay, let's move on. We need to, oh wait, we still need to vote to approve the agenda. Did we just vote to approve it or did we just vote to take that issue off?
A vote to approve the agenda with taking out the agenda item number 3, new business.
Okay, so we can move on to approve the minutes.
Go ahead and call for the vote for approving the agenda without that one item.
Okay, let's call for a vote to approve that agenda without that item. Maddie?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Nancy?
Yes.
Stephen?
Yes.
Did Stan show up? Oh, there's Deb. Deb, can you vote, please?
Yes.
Is Stan there?
I'm not seeing Stan.
You're not seeing Stan. Okay. That passes. We are now on to approving the minutes. Can somebody propose to approve the minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
Okay, the minutes are approved.
You call for a vote.
Okay, let's have a vote. Maddie?
Yes.
Kay?
Yes.
Nancy,
Yes.
Stephen,
Yes.
Deborah,
Yes.
still no Stan?
Still no stand.
Still no
Remember
stand.
to also vote yourself.
Oh, and I vote yes. Okay, so we are now on to the staff items, so it's over to Kathy.
Sure. The first item on staff section is the Q&A with the city manager. Craig Owens has joined us tonight. This was upon request from several board members who wanted an opportunity to have him as a guest at this meeting to ask questions about, I do know there's a few topics that have come up, like the sustainability staffing levels, as well as the sorry, I'm seeing Stan now. I'm going to go ahead and get him on here, as well as other commitments that the city commission has made that you'd like to ask the city manager. So I'm just going to go ahead and open it up for any questions. And Craig, if you wanted to do an intro, you can, but I'll turn it to you all.
Thanks, City Manager Craig Owens. Everybody hearing me okay?
We can hear you.
Great. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be back with you again. I think the last time we were together, I went through the strategic plan, and I really appreciate that dialogue, and am happy to be here at your request.
Does anybody have any questions for Craig? I do. Maddie, do you have one?
Sure. So, hi, Craig, Maddie,
Hi.
Sustainability Advisory Board member. Yeah, so I guess I think this is most salient with like the bus hub discussions that have been going on. You know, the board was able to identify, I think, 4 or 5 policies that seemed like it would direct the city commission to, or like city staff, different boards to at least like focus on like an electricity based bus hub. And you know, as we know, like we got into this kind of too late. So I guess I was just curious about how are those policies like incorporated into city operations? Because when we talked with, shoot, I forget their name, someone who was working on the plans for the bus hub, they were like, yeah, we don't really talk about the principles of sustainability in our meetings. So I was just curious about like how that stuff gets incorporated or doesn't, and why.
Yeah, City Manager Craig Owens, appreciate that, Maddie. It's good seeing you again. There is a lot in progress. If you just look at the capital improvement plans, the lead time for a lot of the development of these plans is years. And so I know, at least for the bus hub design, some of that stuff has been in process probably before some of these policies were in. And I don't know, you know, somebody else could hold me accountable differently if the timing didn't work out. But I would say that we have a very ambitious construction schedule, just catching up on our infrastructure, which was a lot of the discussion last night just on the utility side. And so I do think what we're doing is we're doing a paradigm shift. We are doing a culture shift on how we relate to the values that are in competition with each other. So you all are very aware of the environmental sustainability commitments that we're making, and those need to permeate everything we do. Just like the other commitments that we have, and I will reference back to when I visited with you about the strategic plan. We have 6 commitments. Environmental sustainability is one, a really important one. Equity and inclusion is another. Fiscal sustainability is another. So, you know, those are just 3. And we have to find the balance in everything we do with those. So that's how this, I think I probably described it when we visited last time. Outcomes are what traditionally organizations focus on. If they're good, they're focusing on how to deliver results. But what we've said is, yes, that's vitally important, but we also are going to be committed to these commitment areas that express our values in the way we do things and how we do things. And there are some very ambitious competing goals in those. So that my hunch is, without being in all of the meetings for the design, is that while we probably we're motivated by trying to be environmentally sustainable, having a transit system is fundamentally at its core trying to do that. Some of the things that were on energy efficiency and our consumption of carbon-based resources is probably not something that was as centered as it could be or will be in the future as we continue to do these things. You probably all tuned in to the conversation, because I think you sent a letter subsequent to that about them, the commission deciding not to include some of those pieces. And part of that is getting a policy. I think that was one of the more meaningful nuggets that came from that debate was, why don't we have a policy? And I know Kathy is engaged in that work. So on the staff side, to bring policy towards the policy makers, which is the city commission, and guided also by the boards and commissions that advise them. I think us leading towards adopting some standards through LEED or through there's another rating system that I haven't worked with personally, but that Melinda Harker has identified that really helps with some of the non-building infrastructure. So stuff that's not related to a building that people are in, but is related to how roads and sewer systems and plants and facilities, we can get some good accountability for our impact on the environment. Long answer.
Yeah, cool.
Sorry.
So I guess in that case, so, talking back to the 5 principles of sustainability the city adopted as, something to be incorporated into all city work, that happened in February of 2021. And the commission was presented with plans for the bus hub this year, earlier this year. So totally understand, things taking years and like stuff being worked on for years, but it does make me wonder, what is the process for city operations changing when new policies are adopted? Because from the outside, it looks like, there's a bus hub, but then the sustainability options weren't really covered. The board wasn't consulted on the hub, and the numbers weren't for gas and electricity weren't compared. So yeah, what does it look like to adjust to those new policies?
City Manager Craig Owens, that's why I think we should adopt an energy threshold or standard. The other cities that I've been, we said if we're going to build something, it's going to be a building, it's going to be at least LEED Silver. And that is a very knowable thing. It's adopted and it's an achievable standard. And it can be calculated into the budget, and it provides that guidance. I think we need specificity. We need to have guidance, because your opinion of that meeting or not meeting any environmental guide, even if we electrified that, it still is probably consuming more energy even with electrification than many of you would like it to. So whose standards are we meeting? And I think having an adopted community standard and an organizational standard, it will be useful for us to be budgeting for, because the delta on some of these things is significant in the investments that we're making, especially in the built environments. When we get into the operations of the city, we're not building something new. There are operational standards, and that's some of the ones that I referenced before, which I'm not as knowledgeable on. Kathy probably is. But those are ones that we can benchmark against, and those are ones that are knowable and they have a level of detail. But when the 5 principles that were adopted are not specific to say, this much carbon consumption is acceptable or not acceptable for a given facility. At least I don't understand them to be that specific. And so while we adopt these lofty high level policy aspirations, the devil's in the details. And so as we're doing our work, we really would benefit from having some more specificity so that folks like you who have certain expectations can measure, is this project meeting what we said or is it not? And how much progress are we making, or how many steps backwards are we taking on any given operation or subject? And that is a huge data consideration and a financial consideration primarily, but not exclusively. There are other value trade-offs that will end up happening in some of those things, especially operationally, that we have to consider as well. So, you could say, no, you didn't do it in this case, but, I would ask you then, what was your measure that you're measuring this against specifically, and what would be acceptable and not acceptable? And I'll bet you that the answer to the 5 or 7 of you on this call might all be different if you wrote it down, your answer on a piece of paper, and shared it. So we need to, as a community and as a city organization, we will benefit from some specific standards around this work.
Looks like Deb.
Hi, Deb Ford, SAB member. Thank you, Greg, for being with us today. I'm an architect by trade, so I know ordinances. I usually don't look at ordinances when I'm designing buildings. I look at codes and amendments that are part of the code, or when a city comes out and says this is to be silver or gold or whatever standard, then that becomes part of the program. So I think that's one option for the city to go forward. And also, I know that the city has adopted current building codes and energy standards. So the hub would have been designed to a level of standard that's beyond what is typically built in Kansas. So that's a good thing for us. But I think there is something that we could maybe reach out to the zoning board and ask, and the planning commission, or the code department, to see what we can do to do amendments to maybe city buildings that is in parallel with what was adopted for clean energy.
City Manager Greg Owens, that is one way to go. I think a more specific and policy would simply be that when we adopt our CIP and we do designs, that we've been designed to a certain standard. Because then, yes, we do go through our own processes of planning and code, but it still might be much less efficient to get where we'd like to go than just saying our internal policy is this is what we do. So I hope that makes sense. I've done both ways. What I'm saying is that if you're a private client, you're building something for your private, you're designing for a private client that has to then go through the external review of the codes that the city complies with. If you're just then getting caught into this is what our code is, then that's pretty late, and that's probably a lot of redesign. So you'd rather that your client directed that you would hit a certain threshold. And that's what I'm suggesting, is if we are the client, that everything that we do and fund and build meets an internal required standard that may exceed what our codes are. And when you call out and have to do this specific user or use has to meet a certain requirement, then it can get into some, and haven't been in Kansas long enough to know whether if we do a municipal use within our building codes and our planning, if that we spell out this is a specific way that you're going to have to build municipal buildings, if that applies to schools and to counties as well, which would trigger a whole other conversation. Maybe that's what you'd like. But my point is you'll get A to B much quicker with the city projects if we just say this is the city standard.
I agree, and that's something that the architect and team would look for if you spelled that out that way and it'd be simpler to get
Right.
to quickly.
Yeah. Lead silver as a minimum, there you go. You know, that's again one that I'm familiar with, and it wasn't a big question. We ended up exceeding that by far, but that is one way. Golden Globes are another ones you're probably familiar with, and you know, like I said, there's some other standards that would help. But we need to have a debate and discussion, and we also need to understand what the delta is on these projects. And if we ask the designers to give us the baseline design and then the, you know, some other standard design, and then to cost the delta, that's all. That in itself is going to cost money, as I'm sure you would understand, to understand what the difference is. But you know, understanding that we have limited financial resources that we need to spread out in the community is a reality as well.
Stan?
Hey, everyone. Sorry for my intermittent coming in and out. My internet was horrible for a while. Anyway, Craig, thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. This is Stan Rasmussen, SAB member. Craig, we're the Sustainability Advisory Board. And I wonder, how can we get direction from you, or direction from you and the City Commission, or direction from the City Commission on what we should be advising about? Because without that direction, we're more just on our own, deciding on our own what we're going to do, and it becomes more of an advocacy board. And I think that doesn't make us as useful to the city. I think being an advisory board is something that's useful and beneficial. So how do we get direction from you or City Commission or both? I don't see a process for that at this time. I've not experienced that, and I've been on the board for almost a year now.
City Manager Craig Owens, that's such a great question, and is one that I think you are not the only advisory board that's really struggling with, and that the City Commission is very sensitive to. So I have on my to-do list to make some advice to the City Commission about how do we get more effectiveness in this very specific area, and that'll be forthcoming in the next few weeks. But you know, spoiler, there's a reason I've been going around to our various boards and commissions and presenting the strategic plan. And that is what you should be advising on. And there is a lot to do. No person, and this will get into the staffing question somebody's going to ask here soon, but no person in our organization has more key performance indicator responsibility than Kathy. And she's very aware of that, but it's not alone. She's not the only one. But there is so much work, and there are so many key performance indicators that we are trying to move very aggressively on, that there's great work there. So I presented the strategic plan to most of the most active boards and commissions with a very strong intent of the City Commission to, this is our work. This is what we have to do. These are our challenges. And if you have advice, particularly on the policies that will advance this work, and there's a lot of policy work, especially in this, that is a good place for you to spend your time. That is what is useful to the City Commission. That is what is on their list. It is what staff is dedicated to, and we are more and more aligning with. That is what this budget that I presented, and we'll continue to refine over the next few weeks, is trying desperately to align with. But there's a lot of legacy that has to be done through that process. I mean, we've been doing it without strategies for many, many decades here. And now that we put these strategies in place, we have to get some muscle memory about, okay, this is what alignment looks like. This is what policy alignment looks like. And so your question is right on point. And I would say you're never out of bounds with doing the work of the strategic plan. And it's getting more and more refined and explicit in the work that's required.
So that's a guidance for us, but how do we get direction or know what to focus on? We could focus on stormwater runoff, and the city might be more concerned about waste minimization. in solid waste. I mean, I feel like we need a little more direction. That's my opinion. This is Stan Rasmussen, SAB member.
Yeah, Craig Owens, City Manager. So you have about 20 measures, 20 KPIs, and there are strategies underneath each of those. I'm looking at them on the website right now. One of the things that's happened since I presented to you is we've done it so that you have click on each of those commitment areas, that they pull in all of the outcome cross references. So everything that Kathy is spending her time on is on one page. And so I would encourage all of you to look at that. And I think part of the advice that you could give is, gosh, we've got 20 different things that we're trying to work on. We should prioritize these 3 this year or this quarter. And if we did this work, this would have the biggest impact on these measures that we've decided are the most important indicators. I think that is great advice that would help Kathy, and it would help our operations staff, because remember, these are shared with the operating groups. And it would help you all get, use your expertise to say, these are important, but they're not going to make as big a difference as these other areas.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Kay Johnson, SAB board member, and my resources are still a little wonky, so they may drag a little bit. I'm surprised I was able to actually open my video, but thank you very much, City Manager, for being at our meeting. And I have like a bunch of questions, but I will try to narrow them. For one thing, we do have a contract with Evergy for the electricity that is provided by renewable energy. And Maddie had brought up that, in the project with the transit facility. I think that in and of itself speaks worlds of policy to your staff, because that is the most equitable energy. There's a cap on the electricity, and so as far as cost is concerned, so I would definitely look at that also, and it shouldn't need to be a policy that we provide because you've already signed a contract. So to me, I really believe that should help lead the discussion with all of your future facilities, as well as a plan to replace gas as a fuel source in the existing facilities, because there's only a certain time frame according to the goal to make that goal. And so there's quite a few buildings that I'm sure are not electrified. And so it'd be interesting to see what your plan is toward that. And of course, we'd be really interested to see that plan. You probably haven't had a chance to look at that yet. You've got a lot on your plate. So we really appreciate.
I appreciate that. I'm sorry to interrupt. It's
Sure.
ours. It's not mine. It's ours. And I think the more we understand, this is all of ours. That's
Okay.
how I view it. I have certain responsibilities, including signing my name to the proposed budget, but there's a lot of, that's our budget.
Okay.
And so I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's
No, that's fine.
In the way
I will start saying
view
our
things.
budget.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. And we do know that. And obviously, there were numerous folks that came out regarding the Prairie Park facility. And when we get around to that, I would like to circle back to that. But I do have the staffing issue. I was hoping that we would find the document that originated the analyst position. For us, from what we were told last year heading into the budget, was that the analyst position was an important position because of the strategic plan. And of course, that was before the decision was made to make a split. That was before the funding was, because of the split, the funding was reduced for the director position. And so I totally understand what I understand is that FTE funds and resources were put in to make a whole director position, which I totally agree with. I understand that, but I also believe that the analyst position is still a very important part to make that assistance with those strategic plan goals that are in every department. From what I understood, the analyst was the one that was supposed to help each department achieve those KPIs that were under the sustainability group. I could be wrong, but I believe that's how what we were discussing last year. So I don't see that responsibility lessening. And as you referred to, Kathy has all of these different departments. I really don't know how she, as a one person, can help assist in that. And I know our budget is very tight this year. And, you know, I certainly understand that there are a lot of competing interests for those limited funds.
Thanks, City Manager Craig Owens. Also want to recognize in your kind of recitation of history, Ms. Jasmine Moore left us, and you know that was unexpected and difficult, right? And it probably led to us exploring the split between the county and the city, but also the commitment to stay together in the way we do our work. But the split, I thought, gave us a lot more agility to be more effective in getting things done and kind of delegating the work out. So we have kind of delegated the work so that people can be responsible for it and they know what they're going to be good at and we know what we're going to be good at. Again, our stuff is going to focus very much on the strategic plan. And so there are, for every single one of these key performance indicators, Kathy isn't the only one that holds them. And so understand that there are a lot of people, it depends on which one you pick, but when you go through here, Kathy will sit in a meeting with department directors that have responsibility and authority and resources to do a lot. And they are also just as accountable as Kathy to us making progress. So there again, I use our, there's a lot of shared accountability, responsibility, and shared resources to do this work. But that being said, much like our Director of Equity and Inclusion, those are new positions, and even with Jasmine being a split position is relatively new and certainly integrating these two as key and equal commitments that we're making. Those are ones that are new because, we've had a finance director for, 100 years probably. We've gotten the money part, and that's always been one we paid a lot of attention to. But when we started talking about, wait a minute, what about the impact on our environment and how are we working that? That's why it's built in here as a co-equal and intersectional aspect here. But it's new. And so we've got to figure out how does Kathy and those that she's leading and working with, how do they work together and where are the leverage points? And I do see it building. I do see it increasing over time. And we'd love to do that with unlimited resources. We're trying to balance those out.
Okay, I appreciate that. And so then it seems like I still feel like there needs to be an analyst position, and maybe we could encourage the commission to look at that when more budget discussions come up. But also I do feel like, and this is absolutely no reflection on Kathy, But I do feel like we have lagged significantly in our climate adaptation plan. And, you know, I'm so glad for Jasmine, but we were so sad for us because she had a lot of knowledge that that would have really helped us keep going quickly on our climate adaptation plan. I'm very concerned that you know, I don't know where the records are for the greenhouse gas emissions that were done for the last decade for the city, because evidently there was not a good transition with records. And there's even been some discussion between the city and the county when I've been on a call that the county has a different idea about some of the priorities on that plan. So given all the, not only the strategic plan, but the climate adaptation plan, which we know is very important to many of us that are on this board, that's another reason that we need to have additional staff support the director. I definitely believe there needs to be a director position, and I appreciate that. But I also feel like there should be an analyst position, some additional staff for that position.
Well, I appreciate City Manager Craig Owens. I appreciate that. What the policy board is going to be best aligned at is helping us understand where are you trying to go? What do you want to achieve? And it's my job, Kathy's job, to figure out how to achieve it and align resources to do that. So if you'll tell us what the gap is and what you expect, what you'd like to have that isn't getting accomplished, it's up to us to build plans to try to figure out how to do that, and then to try and balance that in the annual budget process and get the resources we need to achieve those. So like I said, that's what the key performance indicators do. So if you tell us that these are things that you need to see done, or these are next steps that would help from a policy standpoint, and we don't have the resources to do it, we'll tell you.
Well, thanks. I do appreciate that. And I do know that Nancy Muma is our subcommittee chair for the climate and climate action plan, and she's been trying to get our priorities set for us. And hopefully that would work with, and I believe she has agreed to be on that joint group. So that will help. And that has, I don't think that they've had a meeting yet, but that would really help too. And that would help us give you more information once we have a little bit clearer understanding what the county is expecting, so that we know what gaps we need to fill. So thanks, I appreciate that. I'll let other people speak now.
Yeah. Sorry, Kathy. Yeah, Maddie Bell, SAB board member. So about staffing stuff, you know, Craig, you said Kathy is responsible for the most items in the strategic plan. Kathy is also an interim director. Like, there's not even a permanent director in the position. And Kathy, you've been doing a great job, by the way, not like putting down your work at all. But I guess it's just like, you know, is staffing the sustainability office being prioritized? If it's not, why not? Because like, if she has the most, you know, things in the strategic plan that she's responsible for, and also, you know, we are like, climate change is real. You know, you can see that through the national heat waves that we've been experiencing. There's plenty of information about climate change and the sense and the urgency that we need to have. And so like, having more staff, having a permanent director, having an analyst position, moving forward swiftly on the climate action plan, like these would all be things that Lawrence could do to address that, protect its citizens, protect the natural areas around us. So yeah, to repeat the questions, how much is staffing the sustainability office being prioritized? And if it's not being prioritized that much, why not?
City Manager Craig Owens. It is. I think we very rapidly identified Kathy to be in that interim position. There were also a lot. You remember, she did something else before we stole her away to do this. Okay, and there continues to be a lot of challenges in those other operations as well. So I think we're trying to balance out, and there continues to be turnover as most organizations are experiencing. So I don't think that sustainability or the things that we do that absolutely have huge impacts on our environment that are not just in the one office of sustainability. We have a lot of challenges and we're working those, but I don't think they're getting the short end of the stick at all. I think that we keep them foremost as we're trying to balance everything out. And that includes HR, which helps us to do some of this work. So short staff there too. So it's, I would just say, I know you concentrate on one part of our organization, but I could tell you stories about where we're trying to keep other positions filled and balance those things out. I think you would feel like we are hitting the balance the right way. I think there will be an announcement very soon on permanency of the director's position. So I'm not quite sure why that hasn't happened yet, but so I don't think that there is, from my perspective, there isn't a lack of balance or prioritization there. We've got a lot of prioritizations, a lot of different places. So I don't know that I covered all of your question. It was
Maddie Bell said, that's okay. Yeah, I guess and I totally agree, just having the sustainability office work on sustainability stuff is not going to be effective. It has to be a whole city thing, but it just feels like kind of weird that there's one person in the office when you said that Kathy has the most responsibility for the strategic plan items. And it has seemed like with some capital improvement projects proposed or whatever, that the policies already in place and those principles of sustainability are not necessarily being adopted by, on all levels in the city.
Would you please be more specific on that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the bus hub being an example, or
I got that example. What are the other ones?
Right, I was going to say, okay, so maybe this isn't the staff part, but the Prairie Park Nature Center being and the Humane Society being up for defunding when they would fit within those sustainability principles, including access to nature, education, and in the strategic plan, the safe communities with the services the Humane Society provides, including keeping wild animals off the streets.
Okay, so you're just talking about those two proposals. I thought you were talking about other capital improvement plans.
Yeah, sorry.
We have about a $400 million capital improvement plan budget.
Yes, sorry. Maddie Bell, SAB board member, and also including things like the Wakarusa expansion that has been proposed, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, so Prairie Park, the Humane Society, and the Wakarusa extension.
And the bus hub.
And the bus hub. All of those are getting discussion by the City Commission.
Okay.
I will spoil what comes out, I think, tomorrow night, but obviously we heard about the Prairie Park and Humane Society, and we'll be backing down off of those. The City Commission heard that. One of the things that is challenging is less for less. And so I'm going to stray a little bit into the overall budget because we haven't heard if you accepted the challenge as our budget the same way I was given it by the city commission, we have to identify ongoing reductions to close an $11 million structural deficit. So that cannot be a one-time capital thing. So the capital budget's really off limits in trying to solve that problem. So what we looked at was operations, okay? So when we looked at operations, we had to, we used priority-based budgeting, which is a system that we've introduced a couple of years ago and we're trying to use, which is best practice nationally in trying to help a community identify what its top priorities are and fund according to those. And we also use things like cost per person served. For instance, just to go to the Prairie Park Center, you know, that had a $380 million or a $380,000 annual subsidy from the general fund. So when we're looking at what would $380,000 do against the other priorities, is that the very best way to spend $380,000 if our priority is education? For instance, I think you said this helps us do environmental education. So how many people are receiving that environmental education on a per capita basis? So these are some of the things that we had to look against our program scoring and look at, and that's where we led to that. It doesn't mean somebody said that, you know, I don't like it or something like that. It breaks my heart. I think it's an awesome facility. It's unique. So that isn't really the point. The point is when we have to close this gap, how do we do it? And what we didn't have an abundance of comment on was do this instead. Some people talked about not liking the art project, the public art project, which fulfills a policy that has been established years ago here, that capital projects should consider public art every time. But that is a one-time expense. It is not an ongoing operational expense like something like the operation of the Prairie Park Nature Center. So just to kind of give you, so if this body, the Sustainability Advisory Board, embraces here, and I'm glad you are, the strategic plan that says your goal for trying to provide education on sustainability efforts, I would ask you, if you've been given $380,000 and that's what that's the measure that you're aiming at, what are all the ideas that you have to do that? And that's where we need to go. Or if you have less money, what do you do? How do you find resources to do that work? It's also competing with unmistakable identity, other places where we've got teaching kids to swim, and we've got playground, programs and maintenance, and we've got, community recreation centers, and those are, in different parts of our scorecard, but they're still there. And we're trying to decide, how do we keep those programs going? And if we ask to start reducing services in those areas, we would have a different line of people at the microphone. My hunch is. So I would love the help from this body of, are there other alternatives? The delta on the increase on the bus hub, while out of a different pile of money, is still, that's money that we have to account for. So in all of these cases, there's a lot of opinions about don't do this, don't remove something, or don't take something away. We're very open in our budget at trying to find other ways, other solutions, but they're really elusive apparently. And I'm not super embedded in the one budget proposal that I put forward. We talked a lot about a very, very, very small fraction of this total budget when it was proposed. And you've talked about 4 items in it. And, we can do anything. We just need to understand that it's within some constraints. So if you have ideas that this is how we would come up with and account for things differently, then we should do that. what you'll see, I think the posting will be tomorrow night, is my revised proposal that will not close Prairie Park Nature Center and will not reduce as much our estimation on how much the Humane Society would fund, because we got, the feedback on that, but it doesn't really come up with a lot of solutions on other places where the community would say, yes, please reduce this. And I would love to have somebody who sitting beside me to make those suggestions. But they're not, like I said, they're not abundant. Less for less is the hardest thing apparently we have to do. I over-answered there too. But.
Stan.
Stan Rasmussen, SAB board member. Craig, what is the city's role in the county's open space planning effort? And how do you foresee a role for this advisory board to participate either with the city or on the city's behalf?
City Manager Craig Owens. I don't have a strong opinion or deep knowledge on that. Kathy probably has better. My guess is that our planning staff, because we have a joint city and county planning department, will be heavily involved in any of that. And you are welcome. All of these meetings are public, and I have never attended a city or county meeting where there wasn't great efforts made to listen to everybody's viewpoints and voices and participation. I think the county is very dedicated to that, as are we. But as far as you striking an official position or doing work around that, I'd be past what I probably am qualified to do. So if you all want to spend time doing that, I don't see any problem with it. But I will have various staff members that will be involved in looking at it. But I also, I have to acknowledge I have a high degree of trust in our partners in the county, and they take on some Herculean efforts like we do. And they're doing hard work on our behalf, and we're a big part of the county. And I have trust and confidence in the work that they do, just as I do. I hope they would have in what we do.
This is Kathy Richardson, Interim Sustainability Director. The other group that I know the county is asking from the city for some support is the Parks and Rec Department. So we may see some of the Parks and Rec folks involved in the open space, as well as maybe their advisory board. So just wanted to add them in addition to planning.
Thank you.
Nancy?
Nancy Muma, SAB board member. Craig, I just want to follow up on the questions that we had about staffing for sustainability. And I understand you're saying the analyst position is going to be difficult, important, but not right now. But what about the interim director position? We need to have a permanent person there. Whether that's Kathy or somebody else, there's some really important aspects of having a permanent person rather than interim. And I think that's a problem if we don't go ahead and go forward with that. So can you address that issue?
City Manager Craig Owens, I tried to a few minutes ago and didn't do it successfully, obviously. There's some bureaucracy that I don't understand, and I'll just go ahead and cut through it and do it publicly right here. But yeah, Kathy, we intend to make her the permanent one. I don't know why it's taken so long for us to get that done. And I apologize to her and to you for that. But, I think 3 of you have asked me about this, so I'll just break that tape and apologize to Kathy that this is how it's happening.
Great. Thank you so much, Craig. And that's great news for having Kathy in it as a permanent director.
I agree very much, wholeheartedly.
If nobody else has a question, can I ask one?
Go ahead.
Yeah. So as you know, we're headed to about 3 degrees of warming with active climate collapse. Can you talk just briefly about conversations that you've had about how we're going to harden our city against catastrophic flooding and possible tornadoes? because we are going to have more and more of those that accelerate? Is most of the emergency response through the county?
City Manager Craig Owens, it is coordinated here in Kansas. I think we learned a lot through the pandemic response, and I think we have really strong relationships, and we're getting a lot better at that. Our public safety departments, and that's not all the emergency response is, but we are working hard to try and get more explicit plans for the way that the city operations would function in emergency operations. But these are all hazards, so it depends on what your emergency is. We had a public health emergency that obviously involved our public health and medical facilities deeply, and would not have pertained to some of our other departments. Whereas if we had some other natural disasters or traumatic incidents, they would involve us a little bit more directly. So we're trying to work on our planning and have some more specific plans that will absolutely be part of the county's plans. I know that we're not alone, and we can really glom on to some of the emergency management adaptation, climate adaptation work that is happening. So I really like to steal good work and adapt it for our communities. And so I know that's happening at the national and regional levels, and we would use those as well. We have a lot of impact being in the middle of the country, having a river, having the kinds of weather events that we have here. We have prepared for those, but the frequency and severity of all of those obviously is something that we have to pay attention to. And I know that there's smarter people than me that are looking at what that 3 degrees would do to agricultural impacts, food impacts, our water availability. It's not nearly as dire as western parts of our own state, but western parts of our country are experiencing. But we are in the water business, clean water business, and that will have an impact on us, which we're planning for. So it's all over the place, and I am not the smartest person on all of this, but we are working on it. And we'd love your advice if there are things that you can do. You can see that it is reflected in our strategic plan as well.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Does anybody, I think we're all done with questions, right? Yeah, we really appreciate your time, Craig. I don't envy you your job.
I see Don, there's a Don Hawkins and a Michael Almond both raised hands too.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry, you guys.
And there's Joel Campbell.
All right, thank you. This is Dawn. Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, I'm sorry. This is Dawn Hawkins, citizen at large, and my camera is still not working, so apologies for that. Thank you, Mr. Owens, for attending tonight. It's really great to have you here and to hear this discussion and be able to have an opportunity to ask you questions. We're clearly at a crossroads in many ways regarding climate, sustainability, and energy. The energy industry itself is already changing to renewable sources, so it's already happening. And the City Commission does have a mandate under Ordinance 9744, I think, to reduce greenhouse emissions, transition energy sectors to carbon-free sources, and make buildings more energy efficient. So it is hard to understand why the bus hub rehab design didn't do this. And I do hope this ordinance is kept in mind in all design efforts going forward. That said, my question to you has more to do with how citizens of Lawrence can also achieve this. It's not clear to me if Ordinance 9744 directs the city to help citizens in this process. Kind of, I'm not sure how that, if it's interpreted that way, but I feel that it should. And we know that there's federal money coming down the pike to help citizens and municipalities convert to electricity, find ways to achieve energy efficiency in their homes and in transportation, et cetera. So my question is, how is the city preparing for this reality of the need for energy conversion in city buildings and in homes, and staying in touch with available federal funding for this process? And are you working with any organizations that provide this kind of guidance, sometimes for free? Thank you.
City Manager Craig Owens. I'm going to refer that to our director, not our interim director, our director.
This is Kathy Richardson, Sustainability Director. So we are working, actually, this is a good question, because I started some initial meetings with our communication staff, because the one part or the one piece that I felt was lacking so far in the process, we've been talking a lot about internal goals on getting to the renewable energy, but not so much as to how we're going to get the community to come along with that same goal. And you're correct in saying that the ordinance does include the community-wide, so other facilities, not just city facilities and residential structures and such, and the same with the transportation. So I've had some initial meetings with our communication staff on how we can begin to engage the community on this topic effectively and understand. I think one of the first things actually that we talked about was a lot of people are not quite sure what their role is in that ordinance and that strong commitment that the City Commission had made. So first, more educational, and then definitely engaging the community. And the city's about to, or has hired and is about to have a new community engagement manager get started here soon. So that person can help as well. But we have a lot of kind of ideas brewing in our heads, and we have a meeting here coming up pretty soon. But we're hoping to also engage the Sustainability Advisory Board on how we can make sure that there's no gaps in how we're moving forward. I know Kay had mentioned to me a month ago or so, part of that ordinance is also that the city is going to provide an annual report back to the commission and the advisory board and the citizens of how we're doing to achieve the goals of this ordinance. So that's also the plan, to do a good wrap-up report on all the aspects of getting there. So I do appreciate that question, and there's a lot of work to be done. I'm not gonna lie about that. There's a lot to be done, but great people to work with to get it done.
So, and also just wondering, because there are organizations out there, and I can't think of the names at the top of my head, but there are organizations out there that are prepared to help municipalities in this process, and there's funding coming. So I just hope that and this may be back to Craig about how does the city stay on top of obtaining these funds to help in this process, because it is great to engage the public for sure and have public conversation, maybe even like a temporary a citizens board or some town halls or something for people to talk about, how am I going to ever going to afford a heat pump and that kind of thing. So about the federal funding and engaging other organizations that will really, do a lot of this kind of work for free.
This is
City Manager Craig Owens. Oh, go ahead.
This is Kathy Richardson, Sustainability Director. I did want to mention, and I'm sorry I forgot that part of your question, but we do have a grants team with the City of Lawrence, their staff that are working along with a company that's tracking the grant opportunities for us. We're keeping a close eye on not just grants to move our CIP projects forward, but also, those community type grants that could assist and help the residential customers and others here in the City of Lawrence. So it is something that we are tracking, and there's some information that's been coming out here as of recent that we're going to be exploring. In terms of organizations that can help guide us there, I did want to mention that the City of Lawrence, and now with Douglas County, we are a member of ICLEI. ICLEI is an organization that does provide some of that that advice and assistance, not only on things like the climate action plan, but they certainly do have some assistance and guidance on how to get to a 100% renewable energy goal. So we are working with ICLEI. We actually have a meeting at the end of this month with them, our advisor from there, and we're hoping to get some really good ideas on how to move this forward.
Great, thank you.
Michael?
Good evening, Michael Allman with Sustainability Action Network, a local not-for-profit. I want to thank you, Craig, for helping us, all of us tonight, sort through all these important considerations, particularly offering your perspective in the role that you play. And I also want to say that I like how Kay Johnson thinks. I think that her assertion that the permanent and full-time sustainability analyst position is probably one of the most important things that we can do right now. Craig, you asked earlier when we were talking about different projects, you know, what are the gaps in some of these projects that are unachieved? And I would answer that rather than considering what the gaps are in a given project, I think the gap is the information. And that kind of information is what a sustainability analyst would provide to city staff on an ongoing day-to-day basis. There seem to be some mix-up of what the procedures and protocols are about how sustainability is addressed in the city. I mean, when we're considering the budget, you know, how do you weigh and balance all those competing commitments? And I don't envy you, Craig, in doing that. You're doing a great job. But, you know, Maddie mentioned earlier that the Sustainability Advisory Board was not considered, not consulted for the multimodal transit facility. My question is, why is that? What are those protocols? If those protocols aren't there, then the sustainability analysts could fill in those gaps. And these aren't things that are just to be discussed once a year during the annual budget. It's something that every staff member should be looking at when they sit down at their desk in the morning every day of the week and ask, what does it mean that we're going to 3 degrees warming? And what does that mean when I make my decision about methane in a bus hub, for example? We need that information. It needs to happen on a continuing, you know, clear protocols. That said, enough on that. I just wanted to point out that in the outcomes of the strategic plan, I've got this pet peeve that it irritates me so much. The safe and secure outcome has no commitments for environmental sustainability. To me, that is the most important one. If the climate is crashing, nobody is safe and nobody's secure. And we need to think of it more as not police protection, safe and secure in our neighborhoods, which is important, but we need to think of it in the broader picture. What is safe for the climate? What is safe for food security? What is safe for health, for transmissible disease? All those questions that have bearing from the climate crisis. We're not safe as long as we're not addressing the climate crisis. So thank everybody here. This is a great conversation. I'm really glad to have it.
Joel?
Okay, I have several things that are also things that people have already talked about. So I'm just echoing a lot of what people have said. But first thing, I did want to also just kind of like back up Michael Allman and what he said about concern about a lack of climate adaptation in the safe and secure plan. That seems like something, you know, very, very important that we have to have. And then I guess moving on, we talked about like having specific goals and how the city has to have like specific goals around, you know, projects and things like that, like talking about how much we want to reduce emissions, but we already have specific goals, which is again, something that was already mentioned. the strategic plan says we have to have 100% renewable energy by 2035. And well, actually, I don't think that's a strategic plan. It is an ordinance or another form of legislation. And then the 5 principles of sustainability also say that we need to transition to renewable energy as quickly and equitably as possible. So we already have those in place, and sustainability is something that we should be like actively striving for. It's not something that we should be like dragging our feet and make it something that we, you know, have to do. Like it's something that we should be, excuse me, embracing at every point in our government. Like at a planning level, I do not personally believe we need to have numbers in place to say that we need to consider sustainability in all of our projects. Just, you know, think about it a little bit. And I feel like that's what, you know, the bus hub brought to my attention very significantly, is that there's just not really like consideration for that at this level. It seems, just because that was not something, you know, considering electrifying the bus hub was just not something that was really thought of, it seems like. And like Maddie, I haven't read the entire CIP, excuse me. But from what I've seen, there seems to be a sort of ambivalence or uninterest towards sustainability, just in the things that I have, you know, the things that I am aware of, which, to be fair, I am a climate activist. I will pay attention, you know, to the things that are negatively affecting the climate. So I'm seeing more things, I guess, relative to the number of actual projects there are that are actively detrimental towards the climate. But the fact that these exist points to like a lack of system that considers sustainability, despite us having goals and things we've already adopted. So I guess like my question is, how specific of numbers and things do we actually have to have before things happen? Because it feels like we go on into infinity with like defining numbers for individual instances and like, you know, things like that. So I guess like, what is the point of specificity where we can start seeing change per project?
City Manager Craig Owens. Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying. And so I'm not afforded getting into the level of detail across all of the departments and everything that we do and the 900 people that do the work here. I would just say we are making major culture shifts within the organization. And I think we are moving fairly rapidly in a lot of directions to reflect what we heard from the community that is embodied in the strategic plan. We had about 3,000 people tell us what they wanted for their community, and that built the strategic plan. And I think it is well documented that we've made commitments to environmental sustainability. That being said, to change from a lot of legacy to where I think you imagine we should be tomorrow is a lot of work. It just is. And that's not an excuse. It's just stating reality, just like I wish we didn't have 85 vacancies right now that continue to be there. That does not help our work. So I would say, great, I agree with you. And we've got to, you know, if you listen to the meeting last night, most of it was pretty late, but when we got into the capital improvement plan and the rate study, I mean, we're proposing some very aggressive, necessarily aggressive rate increases, which are going to have disproportionate impact on some people in our community. And that's in conflict with other pieces that we have. So how to balance all that out and how each of you decides whether we were successful or not on across $400 million worth of capital projects is one thing. That you make decisions about whether we were successful in all the operations of the city, from restarting hearts to teaching kids to swim to, you know, having roads and bus stops and everything else that we do. I get that each of you is going to evaluate us, and I appreciate those that participate the way you all obviously do, and especially those that aren't on the committee that have tuned in. That's the community that defines what we are and who we are and what we do and how we do our work. So that's all I can say is keep tuning in and keep participating, and just I would say acknowledge that there are passionate people that are looking at the other commitment areas and wondering why we're spending so much time on the environmental when we're neglecting their specific interest. And I don't think we are. I don't think we're neglecting any of them. I think we're trying to push 5, 6, 8, 11 boulders up the hill all at the same time. And that takes a lot of work and continued participation. So you know, Kathy will do better at getting down into the details. I would say just, you know, because it's come up several times, Kathy is trying to be the most efficient lever that we have in the city, and that is bringing in a lot of really important talent that we have already deployed that are doing a lot of environmental work. Some people that are really good analysts that will do environmental sustainability analytics. I know she associates closely with some of them, and that they are there at her disposal to help do the work because they share the work. So I don't want anybody to think that just if Kathy doesn't crunch these numbers, they don't get crunched. There's a whole bunch of her colleagues and my colleagues and participants that are going to do that very sophisticated work. But we will be at this for years, decades, and we will be at a lot of things that we're trying to do for years and decades.
One last quick question, Steve.
Yeah, it's a fairly simple one. I've been on the board now, Steve Kramer, SAB. I've been on the board for 10 months. And during that time, I can't really think of an example of where we were requested to probe into something to make a recommendation. Now with Kathy going full time, and Kathy, bloody marvelous, but you're also full time, 30 days a month. And here I'm sitting in a couple of days a month for an hour, not 8 hours a day. What ways do you think, referring back to the strategic plan, this board could be a little more proactive in developing recommendations, options, and alternatives to a question that's in front of you, and maybe be of more help with some of the expertise that's represented on the board and with some of our network and some of our things? How can we be more proactive in helping you tackle some of these big issues that you're working on every day, especially considering the fact that you have an enormous breadth of knowledge of the full city working? What can we do to help you, and how do we set up those communication channels that we can be more aligned proactively?
City Manager Craig Owens, I am so sorry, Stephen. Most of what you were saying I cut out on. I don't know, there's my earphones or something else. I'm going to try again. I think what I think I heard was, are you hearing me now?
Not so well. If you can hear me, I'll just say that I'm asking how we can be proactive in alignment with Kathy's initiatives and do some work on recommendations, options, and alternatives that will help.
Yeah, City Manager Craig Owens, I think you're getting me now. I think Kathy will be working with the chair and any of you on coming up with that agenda. I think there are some huge policy conundrums that confront us, even if it's just prioritization. Even if it's only prioritization, and that's what I was kind of mumbling about here a few minutes ago. If you all can tell us, listen, we want all of this to happen tomorrow, but realistically, these are the things that have the highest impact, and we agree these 5 things should be prioritized, but don't forget about the other 36. That is useful. That's very useful. I think if you will suggest a policy that is in context with the other commitments, you can't ignore those. But in context with the other commitments, some policies like we should be LEED Silver. We know that's going to cost 17% more on all across our building projects, but we think that's in balance and that's appropriate. That's a huge value, I think, to the City Commission and their very difficult work. And I will tell you, there's another one that I think is there, although it may or may not, be something you all deal with or the City Commission prioritizes. But when we adopted the policy that said we're going to be, by 2030, we're going to be I don't think it's carbon neutral, is it? I think it's that we are done with all carbon consumption, something like that, right? I'm getting some head nods. You all have the language better than I do. That is two different things. So the Average offset, that doesn't accomplish what we're talking about. And that is not the one that you get in alignment with the Kansas City Climate Action Plan or most of the federal policies. Most of them say offsets are okay, that you get credit for offsetting carbon emissions. That's not, I think, what our adopted policy says. That's pretty huge and potentially not possible for our community to achieve. So I would say that's a great thing for you all to wrestle with and get some input from the community on, because getting that mark met by 2030 versus we can be carbon neutral as a community by 2030 are two different things with vastly different impacts in economics, in social impact, in even probably our legal efficacy, to be honest, because I think we've been limited in the source of whether we use gas or not by the legislature. So those are all things that are worth talking about, and I think you're the perfect body to talk about them on behalf of our community and get some input and try and figure this stuff out. So those are just three examples, and I'm not the smartest person in this space. We have 48 boards and commissions, so I try and keep up the best I can, but I'm giving you those are three meaty policy questions that you all could give really useful information on, as well as helping Kathy work through all the strategies that are about underneath each KPI and making some suggestions using your expertise. You have some really, really interesting qualifications and expertise, which is why the City Commission asked you to serve. And so let's put that to work. And I think that's the best way to do it, for my 2 cents, since you asked.
I'm going to ask that we start doing that in earnest. And I would ask that Kathy, at some point in the next couple of weeks, try to paraphrase exactly what you said and give us some of the directions that would really help her in her job and help you and help the city of Lawrence. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, we got that. Thank you, Steve. Any other final questions? Thank you so much, Craig, for being here tonight. Probably a little bit longer than you were planning, but thank you so much for your time.
Works out. I'm glad to be here, and thank you all for your service. I know it's a lot of work, and your great passion benefits your community, our community. And congratulations, Kathy.
Thank you.
From me as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, this is Kathy Richardson, Sustainability Director. The next item on the agenda, just really quick, was the staff report, sustainability staff report. And, the city manager covered a lot of the strategic plan items, so I'm going to skip over that. And one of the items I had for discussion today is I did meet with the chair, and we talked about the goal setting session. Prairie Park Nature Center is available and does have a meeting room. If the board would like to have that in-person masked meeting like we had discussed at the last meeting. And one of the things was about timing. They did give me 2 dates on a Saturday that the room would be available, and that's September 17th or the 24th. The Prairie Park Nature Center is open from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., so it could be in the morning or it could be in the afternoon or around the lunch hour. But my questions to the board are, with that information, does the board want to look at those September dates, push the goal setting session for later in the year? Would you want to do the goal setting session and not the board meeting that month to just focus more of your time on the goal setting session? So just looking for feedback at this point.
Okay, our next, thanks, Kathy. Our next agenda item is.
Hey,
the
wait, my hand
subcommittee
is raised.
Sorry, Stan, I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Stan Rasmussen, SAB member. I would suggest that if we're going to have a goal setting session, that we need to be focusing on goals for 2023, because this year's almost over. We have a board chair election in December. And I think trying to set goals, if we went with one of those September dates, you're looking at 2, maybe 3 months of activity in this year. And I think we should be, when we do get together, and I would like to see us do that, that we should be thinking about 2023, and that should be our focus. That's all.
Thanks for sharing, Stan. Maddie, do you have a comment?
Nancy and Deborah were before me, so I defer to them.
Where's Nancy? Nancy?
Nancy Muma, SAB board member. So I agree that we should do long-term planning, as Stan said, but I don't think we need to postpone until 2023. I think we could start quickly, and I do think it's a great idea to go ahead and plan to have the meeting at one of the dates that Kathy brought up for the Prairie Park. There's availability. So I think we ought to not skip over that, but go ahead and discuss meeting at that point.
Yeah, I was not suggesting that we postpone. This is Stan Rasmussen, SAB member. I was suggesting that our focus of that meeting in September be 2023.
So I was just making that, I think we should go from September through 2023 and not postpone just to 2023. So in essence, I'm agreeing with you, Stan.
I didn't understand your comment. I agree with you. I think that would be good to include the remainder of the year.
Deb?
I agree with Nancy and Stan. I would like in this meeting to establish whether we want to do it on the 17th or 24th morning or afternoon. I'm good with both. And flexible on the time of the meeting.
Maddie, do you have a comment?
Maddie Bell, SAB board member. I am going to be out of town until from beginning of September till August 1st. So I can attend the SAB meeting, but I wouldn't be able to attend in person. I would really like to, but I also understand that the scheduling may not work out. If there's a possibility of doing a hybrid meeting, I would really love to attend. Yeah, that's what I have to say.
Okay, do you have a comment?
Yes, Maddie, I don't know if it was my system or yours. What dates did you say that you were out? Are you going to be out all of September?
Maddie Bell, SAB board member. I think it's September 8th. I know I definitely get back October 1st.
Oh. So I would be able to attend on the 17th, but I would, if we did it on the following Saturday, I'd like it to have a hybrid as well. I don't know what the capabilities of Prairie Park is, but, or are, whatever the correct verb tense is. So if we could see what the Prairie Park could do hybrid, I'm not opposed to try to figure out a hybrid if we have, some people have to be able to do that.
This is Kathy Richardson, Sustainability Director. I will also talk to Prairie Park Nature Center about some October dates. Maybe there's some towards the beginning of the month. So let me check back on some additional dates. I think the board had expressed interest in all being in person. Certainly we can do the hybrid. I know it takes away from those who are via Zoom. So let me look at some more dates to make sure that everybody's available. I appreciate the feedback, and I'll continue to work with Kira on this. The other really quick update and just a time check, we've got 15 minutes, so just really super quick. The 3 items that went to commission from the SAB on recommendations, there was the noxious weed ordinance and then the ordinance on the single-use plastic bags. I just wanted to provide the update that I am meeting with legal staff on that. So that's the follow-up from that city commission meeting. So we're moving forward with working through those. And then on the multimodal transfer facility memo, as you all are aware, that work is continuing on timeline. But the takeaway was what the city manager was talking about earlier in the meeting with staff kind of brainstorming right now and looking at other communities and what their policies are in regards to some of those standards for buildings and infrastructure as well. And that does hit at one of the strategic plan KPIs. So I'm going to pause right there. Looks like Nancy.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you could just send out an email so that you can find out availability of the board members so that we could find a time when most people are able to attend in person rather than just, coming up with some dates.
Yes, thank you. Okay.
Yes, and I was wondering, I'm really more concerned about now what the standards are going to be considered and for buildings and structures. I know that the city manager mentioned LEED silver. I have a real concern and an interest to see that the certifications are actually made, not just the supposed, well, we're in line with this the standards. So I don't know what is the next step as far as getting a group of people together, Kathy, on that and regarding certifications, green building certifications.
Good question. This is Kathy Richardson, Sustainability Director. So we've had 2 internal staff meetings. There's 3 of us on this group. And really what we're trying to do right now is just dig up the information of what type of infrastructure projects the city has. And they're all at different levels of complexity, and some very small projects, some really, really large ones, and then which facilities are kind of projected to be built, and then what to do with existing facilities as well. So we're gathering a lot of data. We're also gathering policies from other communities, and we wanted to do this pre-work before we got together a group of stakeholders. The Sustainability Advisory Board is definitely going to be involved in this process. So this isn't like that staff is drafting a policy and we're just going to present it to the city commission. Right now, what we're doing is the work that needs to be done, which is getting that data together. We are going to meet here pretty soon again to make sure that we're, again, all the action items from that last meeting that we're proceeding so that we're in good timeline to start those conversations with the stakeholders. So I do appreciate that question, though. That is definitely part of the process. This is all before it even goes to the City Commission for consideration. I also provided the link to the Douglas County Sustainability Report. Thanks again to Kim and her staff for that. And I'm not going to go over any of the items, but please let me know via email if you do have any questions, and we can keep moving forward with the agenda.
Okay. Are we on discuss the board vacancy and diversity, or are we on the subcommittee reports still?
Subcommittee reports.
Okay, so we need some subcommittee reports. Does anybody want to lead with that? Nancy?
So,
sorry, just one sec. Maddie Bell, SAB board member. I was just wondering if we could cut off those items at 7:10 so that I see 2 members of the public so that they each have 3 minutes each to comment if they need to. I don't know.
Is everybody okay with that? Yeah. Great. All right, so who else would like to give their report real quick?
So I'd like to give the report for the Climate Action Plan Subcommittee. We met briefly. We didn't have a quorum, but we discussed some of the strategic plan, such as events related to educating the public about sustainability and focusing on those issues, as well as some car idling issues that we could discuss in the future. That's all.
Thanks, Nancy. Hey.
We've had an email discussion on our bylaws, and Kathy sent a template for bylaw updates, and our small group, Maddie and Ben and I, plan on meeting on August 23rd. We'll have some sort of draft so that we can review by then.
Great, thank you. We did all the subcommittees?
Yeah, Ben is, this is Kathy Richardson, Sustainability Director. Ben Sikes is not here for that update report. Then you've got no old business. Number 3 has been removed from the agenda. So we're at 4 new business, discuss board vacancies and board diversity.
Okay, so I'd like to talk about board diversity. We quite obviously have a real problem with board diversity. We are older and whiter than we ever have been. And as you know, the youth are the largest stakeholders, as well as the people who are going to have to deal with active climate collapse the most. And I feel really strongly that we need more youth on this board and more youthful energy, and we need more diversity. So I'd like to introduce you to Alice Jones, who's going to tell us about herself just real briefly. And then I'd like to ask for us to vote on her recommendation to the board so that we can then send that recommendation to the mayor. Alice?
Hello, my name is Alice Jones, or Estongo and Mikasuki. I'd like to review my recommendation for the vacancy for the board committee. So as we all know, the youth are some of the largest stakeholders, and soon to be we'll all grow up. So it's important to improve that diversity by having more, especially people who deal more with the climate crisis, maybe even in their daily lives. I'm Native American, Miccosukee Band of the Seminole Nation of Oklahoma. I'm the daughter of Makokwa Jones, and I mean, my own tribe is like being hit by lots of things in Oklahoma. So natives are especially hit hard by, like, some tribes still even depend off the land. So it's very important that Native people get a seat at the table, as well as everyone else who are much older than me and probably have more like on paper experience than I do. So, and I know I might come off with some naivete being young, but that can also fuel a lot of new policy making and thriving off of new ideas among the board, more so than maybe people who are much older and maybe have dealt with a lot more. My recommendations can be informed by experience from the other board members as well. And I'm looking, and if I were to be recommended on the board, then I would definitely like to listen in and more than talk over others first and foremost, and learn as all I can learn about policymaking, because policymaking drives a lot of activism. It's important that like people like me are able to learn about such things, such policies as these. So, anyway, that's my recommend. I hope that my recommendation will be reviewed by everyone on the SAB. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I'd like to remind all of us that we are on occupied land. We talk about the literal and metaphorical table all the time, and it's not our table, it's the Native Americans table. I think it's indefensible that Lawrence uses Haskell in their tourism, and then we repeatedly don't have Native American people in places of political power in Lawrence. This is a really important nomination, and I expect the board to support it. So I'd like to propose that we take a vote right now. Can somebody second my proposal? Kay, do you have a comment?
Yes, I do. This doesn't necessarily follow the city's way that board appointments are made. It's the mayor that makes the decisions. Has this individual applied?
She has applied, yes, and I have emailed the mayor. Stanley, do you have a comment?
I do. I'm not comfortable with the board recommending people. I think that's the mayor's choice. I don't think that's a precedent that we should be setting, and I'm not going to support it. I don't know this person. I don't have anything against her, but I'm not comfortable with us doing this.
Appreciate your comment, Stan. I'd like to reaffirm my belief that it is indefensible that Lawrence has such a lack of diversity. We are currently, and Kansas at large, is having a brain and youth and talent drain because we talk the talk, but we don't walk the walk. So it is really important that we get more youth and more diversity on the board. And I think we all understand that any environmental victories that we've had lately, especially in the past week, have been largely due to the youth activists who have moved the needle and made this happen in spite of older people telling them again and again that it couldn't happen. And again, I'd like to reaffirm, this is not our table. We're occupiers. This is a Native American table, and it's indefensible not to have a Native American on the board. Does anybody have any more comments?
I do.
Dawn?
I didn't catch that person's name, but I hope the mayor appoints them. And yeah, so it has to follow. I don't think anybody here would disagree with what you're saying, but I also just wanted to say that I have finally applied just in the course of this meeting. So hopefully the mayor might consider me as well.
Thanks, Dawn. Does anybody else have any comments from the public? I can't see the thing.
Stan?
Oh, there's Stan.
Yeah, Kara, I think you have a good and powerful message, but I think that message needs to be delivered to the mayor.
Like I said, I've emailed the mayor with these exact sentiments, and I just was hoping for a little bit of board solidarity and acknowledgement that we really do have a diversity problem, and we need to do something about it. Okay?
Because you did have an agenda item on here, I emailed a couple of my colleagues that are African American and urging them to make the application in the proper way. And I do agree that it would be nice to have some more diversity on our board. We did have a younger person a year or so ago that was a board member. That was a nice addition. I don't have a problem with the diversity. I agree that we need to have diversity, but it is a mayor appointment, and the proper vetting and proper application needs to go to the mayor, in my opinion.
Nancy?
I agree completely with you that we need more diversity, and I would feel completely comfortable of writing a letter to the mayor addressing that issue, that we do need to have more diversity. But I would back away from recommending any person in particular.
Thanks for your comments. Does anybody have any other comments? I had hoped that we would write a letter, but I can see that we won't. I'll remind you that status quo environmentalism has for decades now done completely cosmetic and superficial things like land back acknowledgements and other shiny tokenism. But again, we need to actively fight to get our youth, especially our Native youth and our diverse youth, onto the boards to give them real political power and to give them a real voice. And again, I'll remind you, it's not our table, it's their table. We are all here by their grace, I guess is the right thing to say. And I had hoped to get a little bit more support from the board, but I'm not surprised that I don't. Kay, do you have a comment before we move on?
I just wanted to encourage the individual, because I didn't catch your name either, to start attending our meetings at least.
As you can imagine, somebody who was raised by Makakwa Jones, who is the best board chair that we've ever had, who is the smartest at board policies, who has actual climate planning experience for her tribe, who was the most well-educated of all of us, quit in case there was any kind of hint of conflict of interest. There are many board members who don't feel so obliged, but let me just remind you that we are here to support the youth. We are here to protect the youth. We are here to give them their voice. And we need youth activists specifically because the new bills that are coming down are really good, but they are extremely lacking in environmental justice. One of the biggest problems in Kansas and Lawrence repeatedly for years now has been environmental justice. A young Native American activist who understands policy because she was raised by Makakwa Jones would be a valuable addition to the board. But I will convey your thoughts to Courtney. I think, are we moving on?
This is Kathy Richardson, the Sustainability Director. So time check, we're about 2 minutes over. And I know there's some folks from the public. I don't know if there's any public comment, but if it can be quick. I don't see anybody raising their hand on here. Oh, there's one. Michael.
Hi, I will be quick. Just point of information, on the 1st of the month, the Multimodal Transportation Commission voted unanimously to oppose the Wakarusa extension, and they are writing a letter to the City Commission to that effect. I want to thank everybody who contributed, particularly Joel. I think Joel might still be on the call. He wrote a great letter to the Multimodal Transportation Commission, but even before that, lots and lots of people across the spectrum in the community were active in going to different meetings. I attended the meeting also and spoke, and it was amazing that the Multimodal Transportation Commission was so emboldened to take that initiative on their own because they had not been consulted about it. So keep up the active work with everybody at all levels, and I thank everybody. Oh, one more thing. And then KDOT will be discussing this next Tuesday at the City Commission meeting if you all want to attend. Thanks.
Thanks, Michael. We don't have any SAB member updates, I don't think. Does anyone have any updates that they'd like to share?
We're over time, so I just skipped over to public comment, if that was okay.
Okay, all right. Can somebody propose that we adjourn the meeting?
Make a motion to adjourn. Nancy Muma, SAB member.
I second that motion. Deborah Ford, SAB member.
All right, thanks for your time, everybody. We're adjourned.
Aye.
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 Thank you.